Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to find the variance and standard deviation from a grouped frequency distribution, or from grouped data. And we're going to be using the Texas Instruments 83 or the TI-84 to do this. To get into your lists, you're going to want to press the Stat button and then follow it with the Enter button. So Stat, Enter, puts you in your lists. Now you're going to have class boundaries or class limits. You're going to have frequencies for each class. What your job is to do the following. I want you to type the frequencies into L1. So that is going to be 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 3, and 2. You should have frequencies for 7 classes. Now, if you go to the next column, L2, it says we're going to need to know the class midpoints. And so one way to find the class midpoints are to add up your lower and upper class boundaries and divide by 2. So I could literally type parentheses 5.5 plus 10.5 close parentheses and divide it by 2. I can do the calculation right in that cell, and that will get me the class midpoint as illustrated on the right hand side. If you know the class 5, you could simply add 5 to 8. So 8 plus 5, enter. Then 13 plus 5, enter. And you can just go down your list, finding the next class midpoint by adding the class width. So 18 plus 5, 23 plus 5, 33 plus 5. You can do it on your calculator or you can do it mentally and just type it in. Okay? Once you have your frequency in L1, your class midpoint in L2, we're going to start using our lists to get more values. For instance, go to the right and go up until you have L3 highlighted. While L3 is highlighted, I want you to make all the values in L3 the product of your frequency times your class midpoint. So that means hit second 1 to show L1. Multiplication button, so your times button, then hit second 2, and L1 times L2 will multiply all the frequencies in L1 times the corresponding class midpoint in L2 and give those products in L3. So let's press enter. Now, if you go to the right one more column or one more list and go up, you want to find calculations of your frequencies times the square of your class midpoint. Midpoint is in L2. That means you're going to want second 1 for L1 times second 2 for L2, and then hit your x squared button. So L1 times L2 squared will square your class midpoint before you multiply it times your frequency. When you hit enter, you should have lists 1, 2, 3, and 4 filled in. You're going to want to find the sums of L1, which are your frequencies, because the sum of your frequencies is your in value. You want to find of L3, because that's the summation of your frequencies times your class midpoint. And you want to find the sum of your L4, which is the sums of your frequencies times the square of your class midpoint. So let's start to write some of these down on our paper. To use the that says your variance for group data is equal to the fraction of the summation of your frequencies times your class midpoint squared minus the fraction that has the summation of your frequencies times your class midpoint. That sum is, you're going to divide that by your sample size, the sum of your frequencies. The main divisor is n minus 1. So what we need to find is n, which is the sum of L1. So let's find n, which is the sum of L1, let's find the summation of the frequencies times class midpoint, which is the sum of L3, and we need to find the sum of the frequencies times the square of the class midpoint, and that's the sum of L4. These sums can be found by using one var. Okay, so let me show this. On your calculator, one var stat is stat, right arrow, enter, second one for your first list to get the value of n. Summation variable is the summation of x, so that's going to be 20. So n is 20. The summation of frequency times class midpoint is the summation of L3. To recall what you just typed,